Hey everybody, welcome back to Behind the Veil, where we pull back the curtain on Mormonism and expose the truth that they don't teach you in Sunday school. Before we dive in, if you're finding value in these hard-hitting episodes, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps us continue uncover the truth about the church, and if you're in the middle of a faith transition, we offer one-on-one and group coaching programs to help you break free of high-demand religious control. Click the link in the description for more information. But with all that aside, let's dive into today's episode, because this one strikes at the very heart of Mormonism's biggest power grab, their so-called priesthood authority. The LDS Church claims to hold the only valid priesthood on earth, insisting that without it, no baptism, no ordinance, and no salvation is valid. But is that what the Bible actually teaches? Absolutely not. The truth is, Mormonism's priesthood claims are nothing more than a fabricated system designed to consolidate power and keep members dependent on the church. So here's what we're going to be exposing today. The biblical truth about the Melchizedek Priesthood and how it was never meant to be a human-held office, but rather a type and shadow of Christ alone. And then we got the Aaronic priesthood, and why it was only for the Levites, and it was supposed to be temporary, and was abolished by Christ's final sacrifice. And how Christ's death eliminated all human priesthoods, but the LDS Church put the veil in the temple back up and created a hierarchy that places men back as the gatekeepers to God. Mormonism reinvented the priesthood as a tool for control, glossing over anything in the Bible that contradicts their man-made theology. They claim their priesthood is the only way to heaven, and we're about to prove that it's nothing more but a fraudulent power structure built to serve men who wield power over others. So, let's get into it. The LDS Church built its entire foundation of priesthood authority on a blatant misreading of the Bible. They claim that the Melchizedek priesthood was a human office passed down through generations, supposedly lost during the Great Apostasy, and later restored through Joseph Smith. But here's the problem. The Bible never teaches that the Melchizedek priesthood was something men could hold in the first place.
Yeah, Melchizedek was a single eternal figure, not a lineage. So the Bible introduces Melchizedek in Genesis 14, verses 18 through 20. And he's introduced as the king of Salem and also a priest of the Most High God who blesses Abraham. That's it. There's no indication that Melchizedek passed his priesthood on to anyone else, no mention of successors. There's no suggestion that his priesthood was meant to be a lineage of authority among men. In fact, the book of Hebrews explicitly states the opposite. So if we look in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 3, Melchizedek it's talking about the Melchizedek from Genesis, okay? Melchizedek is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. This verse destroys the LDS claim that the Melchizedek priesthood was meant to be passed down. If you think about it, who is without a father or mother? You cannot be a human being without a father and a mother. This man was a type and shadow of Christ, not a human being. The writer of Hebrews makes it very clear that Melchizedek stands as a unique and eternal figure foreshadowing Christ himself. This is not a system of authority for mortal men, period. So where does that leave Mormon priesthood holders today? Holding on to an office that was never meant for them to begin with. The unchangeable priesthood belongs to Christ alone. The New Testament does mention the Melchizedek priesthood, but only to show that it belongs to Jesus Christ alone. And this is in Hebrews chapter 7 again, and this is verses 24 and 25. But this man, because he continueth ever, hath an unchangeable priesthood, wherefore he is able to also save them to the uttermost that come unto God by him, seeing he ever liveth to make intercession for them. This passage is clearly talking about Jesus. Notice the word unchangeable. This priesthood does not get passed down from man to man. It is eternal. It is held by Christ alone and directly tied to his ability to save completely. This is not about a bishop standing between you and Jesus and telling you whether you're worthy to be forgiven by Jesus. That is gatekeeping of God. That was never meant to be what the priesthood was about. It also puts men in between you and God, their priesthood blessings, their priesthood ordinances. That is not what Christ was about. This shatters the Mormon concept of restored Melchizedek priesthood completely. The idea that LDS men hold the same priesthood as that Christ holds eternally is not just blasphemous, it's completely unbiblical. The LDS Church claims that mortal men and the ordinances that they perform allow us to obtain salvation. Instead of just recognizing that Christ was the last and final high priest and that he holds the authority of salvation. No mortal man has a right to his authority or a right to gatekeep someone from accessing Jesus and Jesus' atonement. Why this matters? The LDS Church has fraudulent claims. They are trying to put mortal men between you and the atonement between you and God. If the Melchizedek priesthood was never meant to be passed down, what does that say about the LDS claim that only their priesthood holding men have the authority to act in God's name? It means that they don't have any authority at all. The authority is with Christ, not with humans. It means the foundation of their church's power structure is also fraudulent. It means their entire priesthood system is a man-made fabrication of what Christ is. It is built to keep power in the hands of their all-male leadership and to gatekeep your access to Christ's atonement and gatekeep your access to God. The LDS Church was never given the Melchizedek priesthood because it was never meant to be held by humans. The entire idea of a restored priesthood is a theological scam, a way to exert control over members, to dictate their access or gatekeep their access to the atonement, saying you're worthy to be forgiven or you're not worthy to. They're telling members literally, you are not worthy to approach Jesus until you go through me, your bishop, and I will determine when you can access Jesus' atonement or not. That is not Jesus. That is not what Jesus ever said. Go through a human man before you can come through me. That is not what it is. They are dictating your worthiness and gatekeeping your access to God.
In genuine Christianity, Jesus is the only high priest. There is absolutely no theological need for Mormon men to act as middlemen between believers and God. The LDS priesthood isn't just unnecessary, it's fraudulent. And that's just the beginning. Next, we're going to expose how the LDS Church completely misunderstands the Aaronic priesthood and why their claims to it are just bogus. The Aaronic or Levitical priesthood was a temporary system for the Israelites. The LDS Church laughably claims hold to the Aaronic priesthood, but the entire narrative falls apart when even the slightest bit of biblical scrutiny is applied. The Aaronic priesthood was never meant for all men, and was never meant to continue beyond the law of Moses. And it was completely fulfilled and abolished by Jesus Christ, who was the last and final sacrifice. Yet, Mormonism not only resurrects it without biblical justification, but they claim that 12-year-old boys hold this priesthood while handing out trays of Wonder Bread and water on Sunday. And let's not even get started on the use of water instead of fruit of the vine, or better known as grape juice, which is used in the whole of Christianity. Let's just turn wine back into water, shall we? Okay, hang on, I'm getting off topic. Let's get back to the LDS claims to the Aaronic or Levitical priesthood. So let's get real. This isn't just a false claim. It's an outright mockery of the priesthood system that God actually established. The Aaronic priesthood was only for the tribe of Levi. The LDS Church claims that Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery were visited by John the Baptist in 1829 and supposedly gave them the Aaronic priesthood. But that's pure fiction when you look at what the Bible actually teaches about this priesthood. In Numbers 3:10, it says, And he shall appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall attend to their priesthood. But the outsider who comes near shall be put to death. So, who was allowed to hold this priesthood? It was only Aaron and his sons. No one outside the tribe of Lehi could hold this priesthood. It was a hereditary office passed down through generations of Levites. So if you weren't a Levite, you could not hold this priesthood. Period. And Joseph Smith wasn't a Levite. Neither were Oliver Cowdery, Brigham Young, or any of the Mormon men today who claim to hold this priesthood. So what does this mean? It means Mormon priesthood holders are outsiders according to the Bible. And Numbers 3:10 says they would be put to death for pretending to hold this office.
I find that quite hilarious, actually. But anyway, moving on. The Aaronic priesthood existed for only one purpose: to mediate between God and Israel under the law of Moses. So the Levitical priests were responsible for offering sacrifices in the temple. They were making intercession for the people and keeping the laws of ritual purity. Now, I want to point out here, if you think of an LDS bishop, okay, what does an LDS bishop do for the people? The bishop is the gatekeeper, just like this, right? They would go into the temple and make intercession, make sacrifices for the people so that they could intermediate between the people and their sins and God. You stick a bishop in there and you come to the bishop and say, hey, I did this thing. And the bishop was like, nah, I'm not going to give you access to Christ's atonement yet. I'm going to determine when I feel like you are worthy to access Jesus's atonement, which is actually a completely idiotic thing because you're not supposed to have to be worthy, right? But what they've done is put this intermediary between the people and God back in place where Christ was supposed to fulfill that. But let's go on to Hebrews 9, verses 6 and 7. When these things were thus ordained, the priests went always into the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of God. But into the second went only the high priest alone, once every year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the errors of the people. Essentially, the blood offering was for the sins of the people. Jesus was the last and final offering for Christianity. This final sacrifice meant an end to animal sacrifice. Jesus tore that veil in the temple. It was done. It was over. All the people have access directly to God now. This was to end the Levitical and Aaronic priesthood. We don't need that anymore. We don't need them to walk in there and offer sacrifices and intermediaries in between us and God, because Jesus was the last and final sacrifice. So the Aaronic priesthood was all about animal sacrifice for sin. It was all about blood sacrifice, right? And it was about a temporary mediation between God and man that these men were doing. So what happened for actual Christians when Jesus Christ came? The entire purpose of the Aaronic priesthood was fulfilled. They don't claim to have an Aaronic priesthood. Why? Because they believe it was fulfilled in Christ. We don't have intermediaries anymore. You do not see pastors trying to intermediate between people, their sins, and God. They don't do that because they know they're not supposed to do that. That was Christ's job. He did that. We're not getting in the middle of that anymore. Christ ended the need for this Levite or Aaronic priesthood forever. It was simply a foreshadowing of what Christ would do. The last, the final, the perfect high priest as far as Christianity is concerned. So when we go back to Hebrews chapter 7, verses 11 and 12, it says, if therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek and not be called after the order of Aaron? For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law. So Christ became the final high priest and permanently replaced that Levitical priesthood. It was never meant to be resurrected again, right? The priesthood system was fulfilled. It was abolished because the perfect sacrifice had finally been made. We don't need that anymore. The entire system of human mediators was completely eliminated. No more priests, No more sacrifices, no more temple rituals. No. So why is the LDS Church trying to resurrect a dead priesthood? The Mormon Aaronic priesthood is an unbiblical joke. Let's break this down logically. Mormon priesthood holders are not from the tribe of Levi, as we described earlier. They do not offer animal sacrifices in a temple, because that's supposed to be done away with. They are not supposed to be mediators between God and man. This includes bishops. We are not supposed to have mediators between people and God anymore. But of course, the LDS Church loves to do this because it is a conglomeration of a bunch of different things that have just been melded all together in a melting pot rather than actually being a logical system. They ignore the fact that Christ ended the entire priesthood system. Instead, the LDS Church has turned the Aaronic priesthood into a glorified club for teenage boys. It's now 11-year-old boys are now able to pass trays of bread and water and call it a priesthood ordinance. In Christianity, communion, or the Lord's Supper, is a sacred act of remembrance. It's not a saving ordinance. You are not saved by that remembrance. And Jesus even says, do this in remembrance of me. This is not necessary for salvation, but the LDS Church teaches that it is, because they need you to need them for your salvation.
Jesus himself instituted communion in Luke 22:19, saying, "Do this in remembrance of me." But unlike Mormon sacrament, which is tied to priesthood authority and worthiness interviews, Christian communion is open to all believers and serves as a symbolic act of faith, commemorating Christ's finished work on the cross. And that's in 1 Corinthians 11, verses 23 through 26. Nowhere in the New Testament is communion presented as a requirement for salvation. It's an act of gratitude and worship, not a commandment tied to worthiness or church authority. The LDS sacrament distorts this biblical ordinance by making it part of a legalistic system where only priesthood holders can administer it, and unworthy members are barred from partaking. The LDS Church blatantly defies Christ's instructions by refusing to use wine or even grape juice in their sacrament, despite Jesus explicitly instituting it with the fruit of the vine. And that is in Matthew 26:29 and Luke 22:18. Instead, the church substituted in water, not because of revelation, but due to legal drinking age restrictions and Prohibition-era influences, completely erasing the symbolism of Christ's blood. And I know, there are so many people at the church who couldn't drink the wine because of underage, whatever. But that's why so many Christian denominations use grape juice as a substitution, because Christ explicitly said to use the fruit of the vine for sacrament or for communion. And this is part of a larger pattern of Mormonism undoing the work of Jesus. His crucifixion tore the veil of the temple in two, granting all believers direct access to God. But the LDS Church put it back up, requiring secret passwords and rituals to enter the presence of God through the veil. Christ's first miracle was turning water into wine, but the Mormons reversed it, turning wine back into water for their sacraments, completely ignoring Jesus' instructions for the fruit of the vine. And Jesus was the final high priest, forever eliminating the need for mortal intermediaries. But the LDS Church insists on priesthood gatekeepers controlling salvation. Time and time again, Mormonism undoes the work of Christ, replacing his simple gospel with a system of control, hierarchy, and legalistic rituals. And how does this resemble biblical Aaronic priesthood in any way? Well, it doesn't. The Aaronic priesthood ended with Christ. The LDS Church claimed to hold it is not just false, it's frankly ridiculous.
Yeah, again, like we always say, this is, I have to say, the LDS Church gets really upset when evangelicals are like, you guys are not Christian. But what they don't understand is that the LDS Church undoes what Christ did, according to the evangelical Christian. Christ fulfilled this priesthood, and the LDS Church puts it back. Christ says the veil is torn. All believers have access to God now on their own. They don't need intermediaries anymore. And the LDS Church is like, no. You go through our bishops. They will determine your worthiness to access Christ's atonement. This is why they're saying you guys are not Christian, because you're not really accepting what Christ did. You're trying to put all of these rituals and these legalistic rules, and you're trying to gatekeep access to Christ. This is why we are saying, I'm sorry, but you guys just don't fit here. One of the central themes in the New Testament is that Christ's atonement eliminated the need for a human priesthood, eliminated the need for intermediaries between God and man. Under the Old Covenant, or the Old Testament, priests were required to offer sacrifices on behalf of the people. They had to mediate between the people and God. Jesus fulfilled and abolished that system. We've said this many times. I want to drive home this message loud and clear, because the LDS Church has not figured this out yet. You should not be going in, having 16-year-old girls going in and telling some LDS bishop sexually explicit things that they've done. This is not what Christ meant at all. And so this is one of the biggest issues I think that I have with this whole system, is that bishop is standing there saying, I'm going to judge whether you're worthy or not. And they're completely ignoring who? The woman who was taken in adultery. Jesus wasn't like, hey, go talk to your bishop over there and he'll tell you if you can access my forgiveness or not. That's not what he said. Not only that, he didn't say, hey, you have to wait a year and maybe I'll forgive you. When they say they are followers of Jesus, I want to see it. I want to see you look like Jesus, because I am reading the New Testament and you people don't look a thing like it. You shame people. You deny them access to Jesus's communion or sacrament until you deem them worthy, instead of Jesus saying, all of you come unto me, I will heal you. He forgives the woman taken in adultery immediately. Go and sin no more. That was Jesus's message, and you guys have completely ruined it. I'm sorry. The moment he died, the temple veil, symbolizing the separation between God and humanity, was torn in two from top to bottom. And we see this in Matthew 27, 50 and 51. This act signified that there was no longer a barrier between God and his people. No need for priests. No more required ordinances. Only direct access to God through Christ. And as I said, the LDS Church, they take this away from you. They put the veil back up and they say, no, your bishop will determine whether you can access this temple in the first place. Not even to the veil between you and God. Access into the actual building. You drink some green tea? No access. Access denied. This isn't about morality. This isn't about being a good human being or being righteous. The rules are ridiculous, because you could go and yell and scream and swear and hit your child that morning, go into the bishop's office, and you could get your temple recommend, but you drank coffee and you can't. The morality here just doesn't make sense. And I know this because I've seen people do it. The bishops are not as concerned with you yelling and swearing at your kids as they are with you drinking coffee, and they know it. They'll argue it, but they know it. The Bible directly refutes this deal of going and being interviewed for worthiness so that you can approach God. And it's in Hebrews 4, 14 through 16, which declares that Christ is now the only high priest that believers need. So your high priest bishop, they're trying to put him in place of Jesus. This is not correct. And it says, seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace. Doesn't say go to your bishop first and make sure you can. It says come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Instead of allowing believers to come boldly before God, Mormonism places a wall between individuals and God, require them to pass through, quote, priesthood authority to receive the ordinances, to receive worthiness interviews. Then they can enter the temple, and then they can obtain this exaltation. The LDS temple veil, rather than reflecting Christ's fulfillment of the Old Covenant or Old Testament, it symbolically reinstates the very barrier that Jesus tore down. The Mormon version of priesthood is a fabricated system designed to maintain religious control and to control access to the atonement, control access to God. It reintroduces human gatekeepers to salvation, and it exalts men into positions of power they were never meant to have. Instead of reflecting Christ's mission, it contradicts the very essence of Christ's atonement.
The LDS Church completely ignores the reality of their own scriptural canon, instead reinstates a man-made hierarchy of religious gatekeepers who claim control over salvation, temple access, and spiritual worthiness. This Mormon priesthood is not biblical, it's anti-Christian. Christ's atonement abolished human intermediaries between God and his people. But, like we've been saying time and time again throughout this video, Mormonism reversed his work by requiring people to submit to LDS priesthood authority to access God, enter temples, and in order to attain this so-called exaltation. This theology has nothing to do with the atonement of Jesus Christ. This is religious control disguised as divine authority. No man, no church, no so-called prophet has the right to dictate your relationship with God. I'm sorry, but the LDS priesthood is a fraud. It's a tool to demand tithing, to enforce obedience, and to keep power in the hands of an elite group of men. If you've been trapped in this false system, know that you are not alone. You don't need the approval of a church to connect with God, and you never did. I hope everyone enjoyed watching this episode, and if you enjoyed it, make sure to support us on Patreon. We have a lot of really good exclusive content on there. We have member exclusive videos, we've got memes, we've got access to documents that you probably can't find, it's super hard to find on the internet anymore, to help you go through your deconstruction process. And also, once again, we have faith transition coaching. So if you're questioning your faith and need support, we offer one-on-one coaching and group programs to help you navigate your faith transition with confidence, no matter where you're going after Mormonism. So click the link in the description for details on the coaching and our Patreon. But again, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.